welcome to episode 139 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans' weekly off-topic podcast, not a slave to fashion, not attached to current events. I am Mike Sollosi, and I'm your host for today, and today we're going to talk about a topic near and dear to my heart. But before we get to that exactly, let's introduce our panelists. First, Keegan Lee.
Hello, everybody.
And second, Emeritus Staff, Stephen
Objection.
Meyerink. Hold it!
Objection? Yes, that's me.
Ah, okay. And take that! We also have Brigid Choi.
Hi.
Now, today's episode is going to be all about the Ace Attorney series. Phoenix Wright, Apollo Justice, Athena... Oh, what's Athena's last name? I don't even remember. It's Athena Sykes, of course. I should have known that.
She's psychological.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
god,
get
I
it.
just realized.
Wow. Okay, now that is just instance one of probably 47 where I'm going to get someone's name wrong in this series, because there are hundreds of names and hundreds of puns involved in all of these various colorful characters of Ace Attorney. But before we get to that, I want to talk briefly about how I assembled this panel. We had been kicking the idea of an Ace Attorney episode around for some months, and Keegan and I were, on our planning page, setting that up. And when we were getting the rest of the panel together, I went and decided to reach out to two RPG fan people who I know are huge Ace Attorney fans. By chance, they happen to be staff that I, worked on the site with for many years, but are technically no longer writing. Brigid and Stephen are both retirees. Stephen, the last time you were on a Retro Encounter episode was in late 2016, I think, for that Kingsglaive episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it's been a minute. And Brigid, I have been pestering / bullying you off and on for at least a couple years to try and be on the podcast, but you ended up leaving the website before it happened, so I had to bring you back from the dead.
Bring me back from the dead, and now I'm inhabiting the podcast like in the Ghost Trick guy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ooh! I wish we had saved that segue for later. That's good. But I think some Ghost Trick might sneak into the conversation later. It's from Shutukami, the creator of Ace Attorney. But let's get back to Ace Attorney. It is a long-time visual novel / puzzle / interrogation gameplay series that started out on the Game Boy Advance around 01 or 02. And they're the first three Ace Attorney games, which are called Gyakuten Saiban in Japan, which I think translates to Turnabout Courtroom or Comeback Courtroom. Stephen, is that fair-ish?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Stephen, the Japanese language expert, and I do not speak 2 words of Japanese, so that might come up later in the episode as well. But the first 3 Ace Attorney games were on the Game Boy Advance, and then those same first 3 ended up having remakes on the DS, and those DS games were released worldwide. The first one was fairly early, I think around 05-06 on the DS, and then eventually all regions got most of the Ace Attorney series except for the second Ace Attorney Investigation spin-off and the two great Ace Attorney 3DS games. But those might come up later. For now, we're going to stick to how each of us individually got into the series. So starting with you, Stephen, around when do you think you got into Ace Attorney, and what maybe was something early about the games that drew you in?
2015. Was it 2015? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, well, for a really long time, people had said that I should get into Ace Attorney because they're full of puns and there's lots of good writing. The first few were translated by my favorite translator.
A.O. Smith.
And I love adventure games, and naturally I ignored everyone for over a decade. So in 2015 I was living in Japan with my closest friend, and he was among the many who was, hey, you should play Ace Attorney. I don't know how you haven't played Ace Attorney. It's you in video game format. And then right around that point, or maybe a little before, the trilogy came out on 3DS. So I bought it and played all 3 of them in like a month and a half, 2 months. Then I played Apollo Justice. Then I played Dual Destinies. So I would say from like mid-2015 to 2016, I got caught up on the main numbered games. What did I like about them? They're well written. I think I'm less aggressively against some of the weaker cases. Like I know people often mention the circus case as being terrible.
It's not the case. It's one witness in that case. But we can talk about that later.
Right. You don't like the clown. My friend.
No, I hate the clown.
My friend said it was just a bad case.
If you press one of his jokes, you lose life points. That is dumb. It punishes you for trying to be inquisitive.
But yeah, so I think for me, it's the overarching narrative, especially between the first three. I really like Apollo Justice. I do not like Dual Destinies very much. But I think part of it, there are things I like about Dual Destinies, though. But I think for me, with the first three, it's that it's a lot of setup and plot threads that come together over the course of multiple games. And I think, in particular, the last case of 3 really resonates if you've played the other 2, and you've played through all of this. And I think the series knows very well how to pull at the player's emotions, especially if you're invested in the characters, which after the first 3, I feel like it's pretty easy to feel that way. So yeah, that's sort of what I like. I think they're well written, and they know which heartstrings to tug.
You can say emotionally resonant or, emotionally manipulative, depending on how you want to frame it, I guess. But they absolutely do a good job. Both, I think that your statements hold true, Stephen. The writing is excellent in all of the English language versions that I've played, and they especially, almost all of them basically have a completely wild ride for a final case. And they really do a good job of bringing everything from each individual game together in those final cases. But we'll talk about them more specifically later. Keegan, how did you get into Ace Attorney, and what was something like early on that drew you in?
It's funny because I genuinely do not remember when I bought the first game. It was the first DS game, but it's like an enigma. Like, I remember the first Dragon Quest I played. I remember the first Final Fantasy game I played. But, like, Phoenix Wright has just been there in my life. Like some horrible creature haunting me.
You were born and someone gave you a DS.
Yeah, that's all I can remember.
That has a very folkloric element to it.
Yes. It has always been here, and it will always be here. But I think the big draw for me when I was younger was that the Ace Attorney series was the first visual novel I had ever really played, and I didn't even really know about them back then. So being able to play this game that was just a ridiculous amount of story, it was super nice, I was never really much of a book kid or even like a TV kid, so having something to focus on and read like a Spanish soap opera was amazing.
Oh my god.
It's beautiful. Every episode just builds on the last till it gets more dramatic.
You're not wrong. This has elements of lawyer and cop shows and elements of soap operas in it. I'm not going to deny it.
Yeah, why do so many people die in LA and then frame other people for the murder?
Yes,
it could be worse. This could be set in like a tiny New England town, like Murder She Wrote, or like a quaint British village, like an Agatha Christie short story starring Miss Marple or something. But like those seem to have outsized number of murders, like just way too many. But when it's a major city like a cop show like LA or Chicago, it's like, oh, there's crime every day. Okay, sure, I accept that. But Ace Attorney also has some confusion on whether it's set in California or Japan. But
it's definitely set in Japan, and then they like try so hard to be like, it's in America.
I think our mutual friend Derek Heemsbergen even had the title of his of one paper that he wrote in college was like enjoy your hamburgers, referring to how all of the very unusual sort of Americanization of the localization of the Ace Attorney games. But
yeah, it's actually a really interesting point because the series hasn't rebooted, and I think with some exception, you don't really have a lot of series that have had one continuous narrative that's meant to be, ongoing, that have come through that many generations of games, because when they first localized it, the status of Japanese to English game localization was sort of different than it is now, in that they made choices to sort of update the setting to California with the first 3, which I think is a little more doable then. You had some weirdness, like when you go to Maya's hometown in the second one.
Which is clearly, a rural Japanese town with a temple and everything, but
so that's not what Northern California looks like?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, so I think
parts of Northern California, maybe.
So I think you run into this really interesting thing where those choices made early on were right for those first 3 games, some might disagree, but I think that maintaining the spirit of the jokes and rewriting new ones worked out well for those. But as the series has went on, it's sort of made, it's a little more vague in terms of the setting, but it's sort of become more of an obvious clash between the American versions of the game and the Japanese ones, particularly with 6.
Yeah.
6 has much more of a sense of place than the previous 5, because I think 3 out of the 5 cases take place in the fictional nation of Khura'in. But,
right. And
there's that one case in 6 where it's super Japanese with the noodles.
Yeah, there's a case that's all about udon, and one of the and one of the the sticking points of that case is being allergic to wheat versus buckwheat.
Yeah, and it's how this is so Japanese and
okay, and it's sorry to interrupt you, Brigid, but that same case also has Rakugo comedy as one of its subplots. So it's Japanese as hell. It really messes with your sense of place.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just hard for I feel that would be really hard for somebody who doesn't know anything about Japanese culture. They'd be like, "What is happening in this game?"
Yeah,
I literally learned about Rakugo comedy from an episode of Kamen Rider that I saw less than 2 years ago.
Right, and you have in Apollo Justice, there's the noodle cart guy who's just who hangs out in Los Angeles in this area and sells this particular kind of noodles and this particular kind of broth, and it's he's selling ramen. Oh, actually, maybe in Los Angeles that wouldn't be that unusual. I don't know.
It would be a food truck and not a noodle cart, but you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm.
But so just the last thing I wanted to say about that is that you've seen, I think, the ultimate example of that clash with the great Ace Attorney games, Daigyakuten, Saibon 1 and 2. I'm sure there are many reasons they have not been localized, but one of them is that you have a lot of really challenging things that they would have to reconcile because it takes place in Meiji-era Japan and in England, and it relies on this very specific historical context, and they say that the main character is an ancestor of Phoenix's, so, you'd have this thing where it's okay, how are we now arguing that this guy from Los Angeles in the American version has a Japanese ancestor who went to England and worked with Sherlock Holmes? You would have to really reconcile the fact that because they have essentially created two different universes, it would be very hard unless they just said, oh, this is a spin-off and doesn't have anything to do with modern Ace Attorney.
I mean,
I guess he could be Asian American.
Yeah, as someone who selfishly wants those games localized in English, I think they would just give him a surname other than Wright and say that Phoenix is, part Japanese through his great-grandfather on his mother's side, or something like that. But I agree. The sense of place is real weird, in part because of the localization of the first couple, and they've sort of written themselves into a very strange corner with the setting of these games, and I don't know if that influenced the decision not to localize those two Daigyakuten Saibon games that are in Meiji Japan and Victorian England, but yeah, I'm just a little disappointed that I can't play them because as I said in earlier podcasts, the only character in Japanese I know is the one that appears on Akuma's back when in Street Fighter 2. But
yeah, it's a shame because I think those ones are the best ones since the first three.
But we're going to roll it back a few conversations ago, talking about how we got into these games. Brigid, it is your turn.
Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, we're good. No. Hey, as long as you find things to talk about, I do not mind at all. Just letting the conversation wander a little bit. But I am going to bring it back. Brigid, what is something early on that grabbed you about these games, and around when and how did you get into Ace Attorney?
Yeah, so I started the series with the Layton crossover. It was my first...
right, because I thought you... I'm sorry to interrupt you, Brigid, but haven't you told me that you kind of don't love Layton?
Oh, yeah, but so... Okay, I'll get into that.
Okay, sure, because... All right, I'm already confused, but please continue.
Okay, so it was my birthday in 2017, 2016, and my boyfriend at the time, he took me to GameStop and was like, you can get any game you want. And I was like, all right. We walked around for a while, and then I was like, I don't know what to get. And then he was like, hey, have you played Phoenix Wright or Professor Layton? And I was like, no. And then everybody in the GameStop stopped and looked at me and was like, "What?
Wow,
played either of those?"
That's terrifying.
Including a cop. There was a cop there. It was like,
it couldn't get scarier. It turns out that there's a cop, and then there's your first grade teacher, and then there's an actual lawyer.
Yeah, and then like someone's murdered there. But yeah, so then he was like, my boyfriend was like, here, you should play the crossover game so you can get like a sense of both of the games. And I liked both of them, but I definitely liked the Ace Attorney parts more, the trials more. And so then the game, I think it came out either around that time or right after, but 5 came out right after. I think that's Dual Destinies. I don't like know the
Yeah, no.
subtitle.
Dual Destinies is 5, and that one came out a couple years ago. I would guess maybe 2014-ish, I think,
Okay.
when Dual Destinies came out.
And then I finished 5, and then I told my roommate, who is like also into like shipping as much as I am, and so she was like, "Oh, you should play 4," and she just kind of like
Oh
slid
my.
it to me under my bedroom door, and so my order was really weird because I played the crossover, and then 5, and then 4, and then I did 1, 2, and then 6 came out, so I played 6, and then I finished with 3.
I think you ended with the 2 best ones, personally,
Mhm.
but that is an unusual order to play them in. It's probably not what I would have recommended.
Yeah, and so because I played 3 last, like I mean 3 I think is the best, but I remember I played 6 and then 3, and then I talked to you, and then you were like, "Wow, so Maya's comeback in 6 meant nothing to you." And that's true because
Oh.
like I didn't get like the sense of like, "Oh, I miss Maya from 4 and 5." And, yeah, I didn't get that.
And especially since, I played them basically in order, and so when Maya left in Trials and Tribulations, I played that in probably 07, 08, and then she doesn't come back until I play Spirit of Justice in 2016. So I had been waiting for Maya to come back for 8 years,
Oh.
and all we got, I think, was a letter that she writes to Phoenix in either 4 or 5, I forget which. But
Yeah.
like I'm not saying that if you're a newcomer to the series you should wait 8 years between playing 3 and 6, but that does, I mean not seeing the progress of it would throw me off a little bit. But hey, I mean you've played most, if not all of them, and you really got attached to the characters in them. Am I not mistaken?
Yeah, no, that is true. I think that one of the reasons I've talked to a couple people and a lot of people don't like 4 or like Apollo Justice, and
What?
I think it's like has to do with like is like you don't play as Phoenix, and so then and people are like, "Oh, who's this new guy?" and they don't like Apollo, and then they just straight up don't like how Maya's not in it. And they miss Maya, which is fine. Like that makes sense, but like but maybe some of that then like goes on to like there's like hatred of Trucy because of that.
I
And
love Trucy.
I like Trucy too because she's just so silly. but-
I don't love Trucy, but I do like Apollo. I was interested in Apollo Justice basically from the beginning because I really liked his vest. It's like that vest, that tie, and Emma's back from from Case 5 of the first DS game. This is pretty cool. And I
Hordes
also
of Steel.
yeah, and I also like I like Phoenix's knit cap that he wears when he's a justice hobo.
Oh my god, Phoenix when he's like a dad. Oh, he's like sort of sexy.
I on a sort of related note to that, actually, I think what I like most about Dual Destinies and 4 is that they put Phoenix in this new position of like,
Yeah.
you've already resolved Phoenix's, personal issues from 1 to 3, and like, so now you have this sort of new challenge of him having to wrangle all these damn kids. And, he's like Dad Phoenix, but like as a result, like, I feel like in the first 3 you have Phoenix tries to be straight-laced, Maya messes with him, and it's funny. And then obviously they tried to recreate that with Apollo and Trucy. But then in 5, you sort of have Phoenix becomes goofy again, and you have Athena's there. So Apollo becomes the one who's like super straight-laced and put upon all the time. But then like Phoenix is wrangling all of these like wild people in his office, like a magician and a psychologist lawyer person, and Apollo who's just perpetually angry. And I love I think that's the best part of that game is the ridiculous family that Phoenix is trying to wrangle in that one.
Yeah, and part of why I liked Spirit of Justice is probably my second favorite after the third one, is because the family's finally back together again. Because you have Apollo and Trucy and Phoenix and Maya and Athena and the samurai weirdo from Dual Destinies, like all in the same place interacting. It's like, oh, it's finally, this is just like everyone's reunited and is at the top of their game. It's like finally, it's like the when you're watching one of the Fast and Furious movies, one of the later ones, and it's the second or third scene where all the 5 or 6 people from the previous movies all like one by one walk into the garage. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
we're finally going. But I'll briefly talk about what how I got into the series, and then we'll go semi chronologically through them, I guess. I remember hearing about them for the first time in my college game club right when this was coming out in 2005, and I didn't have a DS yet. But a couple people in the club were very, very pro Ace Attorney, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? A lawyer puzzle game? What on earth is this? And but then I think one of them let me borrow her DS for 2 days or something, and I played just the prologue case, and I'm like, okay, I need one of these DS things, and not just for Ace Attorney. There was a bunch of stuff good on the DS by then. So when I got my first DS in 2006, Ace Attorney was an early purchase on that, and since then I've basically played all the ones that have come out in English as they've come out. I didn't play Layton versus Phoenix Wright until earlier this year because I didn't have a 3DS when it came out, and then it became kind of hard to find, and it was $60 or $70 on eBay for a while.
Wow,
but I finally got a hold of it and played it just last month, or maybe it's been 2 months ago by now. I'm not sure. Just the days and weeks are just a swirl in my head, punctuated by roars from Monster Hunter characters. So I've played all the ones that have come out in English. I think that 3 and 6 are my two favorites. I don't love the witch shaming in Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, and I'm a little bit salty that we never got Ace Attorney Investigations 2 or either of the Daigyak and Saibon games, because I've heard all three of them are good. But again, let's go back to the very first game. Now, the DS version of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney is a little weird because it's a remake of a GBA game, but the GBA game was just those first 4 cases, with Manfred von Karma being sort of the final boss of Ace Attorney 1. But then they added a 5th case for the DS version that has a bunch of like forensics tasks and more touchscreen integration. That case goes a little long, but it does introduce you to Lana and Emma Skye, who do become minor characters later on in Apollo Justice Onward. So, for me personally, I remember just loving the reaction shots of the sprites, because the character sprites in all of the Phoenix Wright games are very large. They'll take up the whole screen or most of the screen, and when they react to things, it's in a very cartoonish, very snappish manner, a lot of the times with a with a whip crack sound effect.
Yeah.
And every time I finished a case, I was always delighted by the quote unquote death scene of either the killer or the opposing prosecutor or something. They would always have these dramatic changes to their character, and I mean, maybe it's even Kabuki influenced or something. It'll be this 15-second long crazy animation of them admitting guilt. And like the final boss, quote unquote, of Case 4 is Manfred von Karma, who just like smashes his head against the desk, and there's like an ethereal roar that's going on in the background as he's as he is finally forced to admit defeat after being this undefeated prosecutor for 40 years or something crazy. So I like the character gestures and sound effects and death scenes was something that really hit me hard out the gate on the Ace Attorney series. Steven, is there something about the first game that you specifically remember loving the first time you played it?
How fabulous Kenji is.
Miles Edgeworth in English, and Kenji something in the Japanese versions.
I really so obviously that was kind of a joke, but I do like Edgeworth. Yeah, for me it was just the song it plays when you have the cornered theme, the iconic Phoenix Wright song. The song it plays when Phoenix is really pressing someone and is about to win the case.
Yes.
That song is great, and that sort of goes back to what I said earlier about it really like grabbing the right emotions of like they really make you want to solve the cases. And when you get to that moment where Phoenix is like pulling it all together, he's just like, yes, get him, my sweet cinnamon boy. And it's wonderful. So yeah, that's what I liked. And also, the puns and stuff I think are, I think some people don't like the puns, but that's kind of how it's written in Japanese. That's the series, it's silly. It's light, it's fun. And, I've always felt that you can get better serious moments when you're willing to have fun with your characters too. And because, you have all this goofy stuff and Maya's so silly that when things get serious, you have experienced a more full range of emotions with your characters. There's that shonen anime element of just like, yeah, that's right, Phoenix beat the unbeatable prosecutor because he had pluck.
Yeah. And because the unbeatable prosecutor had a bullet in his arm that, for fear of admitting defeat, he left in that arm for 20 years.
Yeah, he would get lead poisoning and die.
Doesn't that get infected? Like, if you leave a bullet in there?
Yeah.
I think it would, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Die.
Manfred von Karma is very, very dedicated to not admitting defeat.
So dedicated he refuses to die, because that would be the ultimate defeat.
Also, just as a matter of record, I am saving my explosive energy for when we get to the third one, and I just lose it about how amazing it is. So, just be aware.
Right on. So, Brigid, what was something about Ace Attorney 1 that you remember loving in particular?
So I honestly, because I didn't play it in order, I played, the more ridiculous ones first, and so then when I came back to 1, I was like, this is really serious and, not as funny, especially because, Edgeworth is just, so serious. I guess he's ridiculous with, his, floofy, clothes and stuff, but I don't know. But the first one, I'm surprised you didn't mention anything about the Jackhammer and Will Powers, the kids show stuff.
Yeah, like Silver Samurai and Gemin Ninja. Yeah. Oh, I mean, of course they have Tokusatsu in the game. That just endears it to me more. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was cute. I guess the DL6 incident is something that we should talk about. But I don't know. I just thought it was so. It was scary and serious, and I was just man, this poor child witnessed his father dying, and then thought he was the. Oh my god! I just felt so sad.
Yeah, no wonder he's such a Sasuke.
Yeah, and Edgeworth / Kenji really softens up in the in later games, so it probably was weird. You're used to a much more cuddly Edgeworth in the later series, and then going back to Phoenix Wright 1, it's what sticks up your ass, Edgeworth? Come on, man.
He's a little more Edgeworth and a little less edgelord later on.
Oh, you were missed on RPG Fans Podcast, Stephen. You truly were.
I saved it for Phoenix.
So, Keegan, same thing for you. Is there what jumps out to you about that first game that you remember many years later? Because, again, this is perhaps predates your childhood, if I remember.
Oh, yes. I was born in 2012, in case anybody didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yes. You just age super fast, just like Robin Williams and Jack.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, so I remember specifically the moment in Case 3. I'll try not to be super spoilery, but towards the end
please.
of the last...
We're going to spoil the hell out of all of these games, so listeners beware.
Okay, so towards the last moments of the investigation in the third case, you finally come to meet the producer of... Oh, I should explain. The third case involves the Steel Samurai Kids show.
Yeah.
One of the actors has been murdered. Another actor has been, arrested, trying to basically save that other actor's life. So you get to the producer, you have all the information that, hey, you might be responsible for this. And you show it all to her, and she's like, oh, okay, well, here's my counterpoint. And she just brings out an entire mafioso group, basically spelling literal doom for Phoenix and Maya. The screen goes black, then all of a sudden, Cornered picks up, and your boy Dick Gumshoe bursts in and literally saves Phoenix and Maya's life.
Oh, Dick Gumshoe.
That made Dick Gumshoe my favorite character, and also kind of cemented these twists and turns that happen throughout this entire series, Oh, it still gives me shivers right now.
Often, maybe too often, Phoenix and Apollo and Athena almost stumble their way to a not guilty verdict just by pulling new lines of inquiry and evidence straight out their ass and maybe tricks a witness or a prosecutor into a mistake, and it almost makes them seem like less good at their jobs. But it's like oh, come on, Phoenix Wright, like shouldn't you actually have case law or something to cite in this instead of logic that you don't even seem to understand yourself? Yeah, that is one of many good examples of some real strange out of left field endings to cases.
I guess like something also that I forgot to mention too is like in the very beginning, the first trial, you're with Mia.
Oh yeah, okay, I know
and
where this is going.
Immediately dies, and like it's crazy. And she dies, and her sister is blamed for it. And like I'm like, oh my god, this is just a shit show. Like I mean, yeah. So that was weird. I mean, Mia shows up throughout the rest of the series.
Yeah,
anyway.
it's perhaps worth noting. Mia is Phoenix Wright's mentor, and she is in a very a very cool lady suit. But she also hails from a family of spirit mediums, and her younger sister Maya is charged with Mia's murder in Case 2 of Game 1, and after Phoenix resolves that, Maya becomes his sidekick, and Maya also occasionally channels the spirit of her dead older sister.
And as we all know, when you channel the spirit of your sister, your breasts grow.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's just physics. And also, like,
Which
spirit...
is probably
spirit,
one of my least favorite parts of the series.
Yeah.
And, well, spirit channeling and Maya taking on the identity of dead people is a recurring thing in the series that sometimes gets very weird, but is first experienced in that one. And no, I haven't mentioned this yet, but if any of you are interested in the films of Takashi Miike, that multi-genre Japanese madman of a director, he did do a live-action version of Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, and he doubles down on the spirit medium stuff. Like the very first scene of the movie is Mia and Maya's mother channeling the spirit of the victim of the DS9 incident. Like and like it even goes to a scene in the underworld. It's completely bonkers. The movie is like briefly sort of breezes by cases 1 and 3 and is really about Mia's murder, and then case 4 is sort of what 90% of that movie is.
How is the movie?
It's not bad. It's very cartoony and silly, but I enjoyed it watching it. I like Miike a lot because, I mean, the dude is so crazy. Like I don't even want to begin to describe Ichi the Killer. And he did one horror movie in his entire career on a lark, and it's the scariest horror movie I've ever seen in my entire life. So he's a very talented, but also sort of crazy, fast shooting director that goes all over the place. I think he's like a Japanese version of Rob Rodriguez, except better. But yeah, the live action Ace Attorney movie, not bad, worth checking out if you've played the game and enjoy the series a bit. But mostly I'm like a fan of Miike and Ace Attorney, so of course I'm gonna watch Miike's Ace Attorney movie.
I watched like a little bit of it, and then I was like, these look like people in cosplay, and just like stopped.
Kinda, yeah.
watching.
I mean, God, like Larry Butts's character in that movie is real silly, like almost too silly.
Hey, if something stinks, it's probably the butts.
But he
They were
does
good.
he does save case 4 with the because he was listening to the radio on Christmas.
Yeah, he does. It's true. Gotta
But anyway, that's Ace Attorney 1. It's maybe a little bit unsophisticated and a little bit overly melodramatic compared to the later games, with some exceptions. But because they hadn't really quite figured out all the characters yet, especially Edgeworth, as we mentioned. But
Godot is looking at you with disdain right now.
oh, Godot, yeah. So that's totally fair. Godot's maybe my favorite prosecutor in the whole series.
What about Clavier? Oh my god!
I like Clavier quite a bit, but I would rank Godot ahead of him. Godot's amazing.
But Clavier is so hot.
He does have very sexy hair. I cannot deny that at all.
I can't. I'm not on video, but sips coffee.
I mean, I'm currently thrashing around a whip right now, so... But that's just me.
Oh, I mean, I guess we could move on.
Oh, all right. Well, let's see. So Keegan, let's talk about Ace Attorney 2 and Franziska von Karma.
Yeah.
All right, but please, Keegan, before you go into it, answer me this question first. What's the most ridiculous thing about Franziska? That she is 16 years old and defending in court, that she moves from Germany to whatever country they're supposed to be in and is able to, immediately go defend murder trials, or that she is openly whipping the judge with a bullwhip during cross-examination. Which of those three comes across as silliest?
Could I also add one more to that list?
Oh, please.
Go for it.
The Harry Osborn syndrome of, my father was a murderer and a psychopath, but I'm really mad at you for pointing that out.
Oh, true.
So, all right, so A, B, C, or D, Keegan? Which one is the least plausible thing about Franziska?
Oh, God. Honestly, if I really think probably C, whipping people constantly in court, I feel, would instantly
including
get you
the
taken
judge!
out by a bailiff. Yeah, including the person who decides. Like, how would he just not go, all right, oh, God, I forgot the term for it. What is it when no, not detained, but when
Mistrial?
they screw up a court case, mistrial, yeah.
Oh, contempt of court?
Yeah, she should be held in contempt for every line of dialogue she has.
I think they tried to do that. I think the judge was like, bailiff, come in, and then she whipped the bailiff.
Well, never mind.
I don't remember that exact scene, but I believe it 100%.
These Californian judges are too weak on crime.
Look, it's not like she was pulling out a sword and cutting anyone's hair off in the middle of the trial.
Which does happen in Dual Destinies. And maybe also Spirit of Justice?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, he only shows up in one case in Spirit of Justice.
So, I will say about Ace Attorney 2, I feel like it's a better game than 1, but I feel like it's less important to the overall arc, considering the first trilogy.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's very fair. It introduces psyche locks, which are a visual representation of breaking down interrogation subjects during the investigation phases of the game. And and listeners, if listeners have made it this far, they probably know that the game is half investigations and half trials. But in the investigations are basically old school adventure game, like find all the things and talk to all the people before you can get to later parts of the story. But I think Ace Attorney 2 is the weakest one. I really liked the final case in it because, again, every final case in every Ace Attorney game is a wild ride. But especially because I think it might even be the only time in the series where Phoenix defends someone who was clearly guilty, and his guilty verdict that basically results in his his client to go into hiding because his client accidentally angered the hitman he hired is a confusing but cool ending to Ace Attorney 2, which otherwise I think has, that circus case. I know it's cliche to hate on it, but I don't think I think it's one of the weaker ones in the whole series.
It's a real circus.
Oh my god. I agree with you though. Like, I think the last case in that series in that game is so good. And I was thinking, when I was playing these games, because 2 was my the 4th or 5th game that I played, I was like, do you ever lose? And is it part of the story that you lose a case? And then I played this one, and I was like, oh, yeah. And when you're when I'm watching Pokemon or something, and I'm like, oh, does Ash ever lose? And it's just
he always loses.
No, he only loses at the very end.
Okay,
the entire series he wins, and then at the very end he loses. But when you lose, then you become an actual you become more real, I think. And so then I was like, okay, cool, he's finally lost.
And as an aside, I mean, I think it's ridiculous that basically every Ash story arc in Pokemon is Rocky 1. It's why can't he have a Rocky 3 or Rocky 4? It's always Rocky 1. He's gonna lose at the end, but he'll be okay with it because he learned or some BS. I don't know, whatever. So
when did Rocky get caught up in the crossfire between Mew and Mewtwo?
I was gonna say, is Ash gonna end the Cold War?
Arcanine!
I had been asking my friend when I was playing the games, because we lived together, so I would offer my commentary on the games as I went along. And I think in the middle of 2, I was like, does Phoenix ever have to defend someone who's guilty? He was like, I don't know. Maybe you should play the series. And I think they did a lot of interesting stuff with that. I like the bad ending in 2. If you fail, Phoenix quits lawyering. It's very grim, but it's also, I think it's an interesting. It's sort of in the way visual novels with multiple endings. You get to explore different aspects of these characters that you might not see if there were only quote unquote one timeline where everyone's successful.
Oh, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah,
And
if
that
you
ending to the last case is, unless you can really suss out the weird logic of the game, it's not easy to understand what you have to do. Because Gumshoe bursts in, it's like, hey, I raided the evidence locker, and here's 3 things that might be important to the case. And you have to pick one of those items and present it to one previous witness, and get the exact combination right to win the day, basically.
right,
It's-
and you know, if you fail, it's the first time they use the Phoenix head in hands emote.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
You know,
really?
that's where it comes from. It is from 2. If you fail the case and Maya gets, I think Maya gets killed or
Mhm.
just
Oh my
disappears
God.
or whatever. But yeah, Phoenix like gives up and quits being a lawyer, and the ending is like sad Phoenix.
Wow.
So I thought that was a really interesting moment, and I think it's one of the first times where the series has some sort of a challenging moment for Phoenix outside of just like Yoku Gambare shonen hero. Like it also is a good, I think, foreshadowing of how personally affecting the cases in the third one are going to be. So overall, I think 2 is a better game than 1, but I actually think it's a worse experience, except for the final case. And that's because I feel like the final case is sort of the first hint of what they're going to try to do in 3.
All right, and let's move on to 3. Ace Attorney 3, called Trials and Tribulations in the United States, is many people's favorite, I think, or it's a common favorite at least, because the stories are hella dramatic. The final case is maybe the craziest case in series history, and there's 2 flashback cases where you get to where the central character is a young Mia Fey who is really cool. Like I loved using her.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think by and large, I mean, what's interesting about 3 is that, you know, there's really only one unrelated case in 3. Almost all the cases
is it the
are...
Yakuza one?
I think so, yeah. But like almost all the other cases, in fact, I think all the other cases feed into the 5th case or the final case.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's the first one, which is a Mia flashback, where she's defending Phoenix, and they end up convicting Phoenix's girlfriend, Dahlia Hawthorne. And then the second one and I'm going to go through the whole story because it'll frame us talking about case 3.
Okay.
The second one is he's defending a I don't remember all the details of case 2, but I know that the
I pulled it up. Oh, it's the art thief.
oh.
Yeah, that
Right.
one's not related to.
That one really isn't. But okay, well, but the third one is amusingly a Yakuza thug impersonates Phoenix in an unseen trial, which puts a bad loss on Phoenix's record, and then the real Phoenix Wright defends the defendant in the retrial, and then it ends up working out. But case 4 is another flashback where Mia and her former superior, what's Godot's real name again?
Diego Armando.
Yeah, Diego Armando. That's it. Her former senpai Armando, in an earlier case previous to case 1, where Dahlia Hawthorne is accused of poisoning someone again, and it comes out and but it ends up working out poorly, and Diego Armando dies under mysterious circumstances, and it comes out that basically what happened, and this isn't through partway through case 5, was that Dahlia Hawthorne poisons this person, and but hides evidence in a what was it, a badge or a card, something that she gave Phoenix. She hides the evidence somewhere, and Phoenix Wright accidentally accepts it as a gift.
No, it was a necklace.
A necklace, that was it. Yeah, it was hidden in a necklace, and Phoenix becomes very attached to the necklace, and Dahlia dates him for a year, trying to get the necklace back from him. And but then it comes out later in case 5 that it was Dahlia's sister Iris insisted that Dahlia not kill Phoenix, and so she took Dahlia's place for a year, dating Phoenix and trying to get the necklace back from him.
Right, and it also turns out that Morgan Fay from Phoenix Wright 2 is part of the final case. So
that's right, yeah.
It ties in all of the sub stories from the series.
And Morgan Fay, who is Mia and Maya's aunt, tries to use her daughter Pearl, which is Maya and Mia's adorable young cousin, right?
Love her. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And she tries to get Pearl to kill Misty Fay, Mia and Maya's mother, who has been a children's book author in hiding for some decades.
Yeah.
But then basically, in order so that Pearl doesn't accidentally kill her aunt slash Maya's mother, Godot performs the act instead. And Godot is a mysterious coffee-loving prosecutor that was the prosecutor in cases 2 and 3. And basically all of these characters come to a head. Basically everyone in the entire history of the series, except for Larry Butts, well, no, including Larry Butts, is involved in Case 5. And for one part of the case, when Phoenix is absent, you use Miles Edgeworth both as a defender and as an investigator. So it's fun getting to control Miles for the first time.
Oh, that was so good.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Case 5, and and maybe the craziest moment in it, in my opinion, was when Dahlia Hawthorne comes to the stand mysteriously, even though she was executed years earlier. It ends up being Dahlia's ghost possessing Maya.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
It's completely insane.
It's hard to explain, but when you're playing it, it comes together so well, which I think is why it's a good mystery in the tradition of your Agatha Christie type stuff.
It's riveting and mind blowing as you're playing it, but explaining it now, I probably sound like a babbling crazy person.
I think so. We were talking earlier about our favorite moments in these in the series, and it's really for me my defining Phoenix Wright moment. And the reason I think I haven't been quite as high on the series since 3, even though I've liked them, has been that I don't think they've ever quite touched the moment when you are finally solving the case. Like, Mia shows up in the background with Phoenix as you finally figure out that it's Godot that is responsible for all of this. And, you point out the visor and, the lights go out in the courthouse and his visor turns back on. And it's
that's why Pearl was able to identify who was there in total darkness.
Right. And of course, the most important moment is when Phoenix finally does the super objection with Mia. It plays a remix of the cornered theme from the first game. As you sort out the ultimate mystery, and it's just like it's a great character moment for Phoenix. It's a perfect, to me, culmination of everything that they've been doing. And again, most importantly, they play that amazing version of the song from the first game. So they know exactly how to get the right emotion out of you to feel the way Phoenix does when he's like, "I've finally got it." It's so good. It's
a tremendous moment of release and catharsis. It really ties pieces together from every game in the series and every major character in the series. It's crazy. And part of why, Brigid, I recommend playing the first 3 in order if you can.
Brigid.
Story-wise and narrative-wise, the third game is probably the best one, and its final case is awesome.
Well, it's a good thing I didn't play 3 first, right?
Yes, agreed. Yeah. We are in agreement there. Keegan, is there something about that final case or anywhere in the third game that you particularly remember that we haven't brought up already? Because we've run through a good 3/4 of it, I guess.
We've hit the heart of it, but personally for me, my favorite was being able to play as Edgeworth for a short time.
That was cute.
He is my boy. It's the reason why I love the Ace Attorney Investigation game, not the series, because I haven't been able to play the second one.
Right.
But I've got a lot of anger for that part. Man, it is a good culmination of everything that's been going on.
I think Edgeworth coming in that game is really cute because there's a part where they're at the temple or shrine or wherever they are. I think it's a temple. And then there's an earthquake or something, or there's something that trembles the ground. And then Edgeworth just freaks out because of the earthquake that happened and that we talked about in case 1, or that we found in case 1. I mean, game 1. And Phoenix is immediately how is Edgeworth? Is he okay? And he's just so worried about him. And I'm like, oh!
Naruto loves Sasuke.
Aww.
I was also very amused that Edgeworth borrows Phoenix's Magatama so he can see psyche locks on characters.
Oh, yeah.
And when he sees one for the first time, he goes, yes, Phoenix described these to me. These are psycho locks.
Yeah.
Again, they'll still, even though this is very serious murder cases, they'll still, have moments of levity like that I appreciate. But let's stay on the subject of Edgeworth. There was that spin-off game that you mentioned, Keegan, Miles, which is called Gyakuten Kenji in Japanese, or Ace Attorney Investigations Miles Edgeworth in English. They released 2 of those on the regular DS. and we only got the first one. I think it's maybe the worst Phoenix Wright game, that first Investigations game. It's fun controlling Edgeworth, but it's basically just everything moves much more slowly, and the trial segments are a lot less exciting. My favorite part of it, though, is, again, the final case is pretty crazy, because you're finally outing an assassin that had gone undercover in a foreign nation for 10 years or something crazy, and and basically the final boss is diplomatic immunity, and you have to basically work your way around a foreign national living in Japan/California. Basically find a way to pierce through their ultimate end boss armor of diplomatic immunity. That's cool, but it really crawls even for a series that is sometimes slow paced. And
I can understand that.
I don't really recommend it unless you've basically exhausted all of your other anime lawyer options.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the slow pace of it too kind of comes from how the game is structured itself. Because for those who haven't played it, rather than the original Phoenix Wright games where you're examining a straight screen and just clicking around on that, with Ace Attorney Investigations, it's more akin to an actual point-and-click adventure where your character is moving around on the screen and has to move from item to item to actually, figure out what it is. So I can understand the slowness argument. That's totally fair, and I accept it.
Is it slower than the case they added into one with?
Oh no, that is the case in one.
The final case in Ace Attorney in Investigations is about that level, I think.
You think so?
Yeah, they're both slow as hell, man.
Yeah.
I was trying to play that added case with Emma, like in the first game, and I was just like, I don't know what's going on. I don't like any of these characters. Who's this cowboy? Who's this girl selling lunches? And like I just wasn't into it at all. And then but I was going through it just because I was going through it, and then I said something about it on Twitter, and then Steven immediately was like, that case is really bad, just skip it. And I was like, okay.
I did like the villain in that case, though. I thought he was genuinely intimidating the police commissioner.
Gant. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like he genuinely felt like a serious threat. Like, if we mess up here, all of our lives are ruined.
Yeah. And his transformation from smiling goofball into rage monster is pretty good. But again, I love villain transformations and I love villain death scenes in this series.
Yeah, another villain transformation is what's his name? But the dude. Matt on guard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In the second game, when he flips back his hair, he flips back his hair, and there's a nasty scar. It's like, oh man.
But that's why 3 it's so good because it brings everything together and very well. But I was so scared all throughout 3 because I'm really bad when people trick me and when I trust somebody and then it turns out they're the bad guy. And that's all 3 is. That happens 3 times throughout the game.
Yeah, that happens probably at least 10 times throughout the series. You must have had a very stressful play experience, Brigid.
Yeah, no, it was I had cold sweats throughout that game. And at the very end when you meet Iris and she's super nice, I was I want to trust you because you're so nice, but are you just gonna do the same thing?
Well, I mean, they break one of the rules of detective fiction and have multiple cases end up with identical twins shenanigans, which I think is sort of cheating a little bit. It's like, oh come on, when it's multiple personalities or identical twins, I roll my eyes every time.
Yeah.
But let's move on a little bit. Ace Attorney 4 is a bit of a turning point for the whole series because. In a previous case, Phoenix has been disbarred, and he's living as what I referred to earlier as a justice hobo, and he is being defended by a young attorney named Apollo Justice, who could not have a more obvious name. But from the first to the end, they introduce a lot of crazy stuff. Apollo is able to notice tells in witnesses by his magic bracelet. But if he notices someone's eyes shifting or hand moving, he'll focus on that part of their testimony to try to suss out what is like what needs to be done. It's I think it added some cool mechanics that weren't in previous games. Emma Skye, one of the main characters in Case 5 of Ace Attorney 1, is now the investigating detective instead of Gumshoe. Brigid.
And Gavin and Claudia.
Brigid. It's
my boyfriend.
It's time to talk about the Gavin brothers.
And Kristoff is evil and very manipulative, and also like pretends to be nice, but turns out is terrible.
Oh yeah, God, you want to talk about a betrayal? He seems like a nice dude in Case 1, but at the very end he's revealed to be the murderer, and then he comes back in Case 5 where he has been revealed to be manipulating everything from the very beginning.
Right.
But you finally shut him down because for some reason they decided to introduce a jury trial for the first time in the series.
I think maybe that first case is like the first time that's ever happened, where like your assistant turns out to be the killer, and
I think it might be the only time.
But then there's Clavier, who is my boyfriend and who is very attractive, and also gay for Apollo, which is fine.
Okay. Oh, of course it is. We're accepting of all peoples and creeds and preferences on Retro Encounter.
And he plays the guitar.
Yeah, he plays.
He does.
It's so obvious though, because like when you first when you first meet him, he says, "Wow, I've never felt this way for a man before," and I'm like, "Okay, guys, like
it's like okay, come on."
This is like
they have to know what they're writing here.
First of all, that's a lie.
Oh, wait, who else? What? Oh, yeah.
No. I was just being facetious. Like, he's like, I've never felt this way before. It's like, oh, yes, you have. Don't lie. We know.
Yeah, and so then, like, I don't know, and then Apollo kind of battling against how flirty Clavier is like so funny. And then he has that like ridiculous like rock band it's like full of lawyers and police officers, and they just make like weird lawyer songs.
He is very snazzily dressed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it matches up to Godot's vest or Edgeworth's cravat, but it's very, very good.
It is good. He's very sexy. And then he comes back in 5, but he's like better art now, and I'm like, oh God, kill me.
But yeah, like Ace Attorney 4, it's a little weird. We were talking about how Phoenix his attitude changes in 4. It was a little strange to me playing them in order, where Phoenix is again stumbling on his way to a not guilty verdict in most of the first 3 games, and then in 4 he's very in control. He's giving very sage and calm advice to Apollo. He is the most chill he has ever been by far in any game. And but then in 5 he goes back to his old outfit and is back to stumbling into justice again. It was like, oh, this isn't the same in control Phoenix I remember. But now now he's like a surrogate father to at least 2 or 3 20-somethings.
Just like running an orphanage.
Yeah, basically an orphanage.
An orphanage
like,
for wizards and lawyers.
Yeah, no kidding.
The Write Anything agency.
Yeah, and then Apollo gets another father figure in Ace Attorney 6. In fact, Jesus, Ace Attorney 6 just might as well be like Apollo's dad's the game. But
that's like something that people have said, that like Apollo, like his mom is actually alive, and like so much of it is him being like, yeah. I'm an orphan, I don't have any parents or family.
In 4 for sure. But then in 5. In 5, he gets really angry. He's like if like young Phoenix Wright is like Dick Grayson Robin, he is definitely Jason Todd Robin in Ace Attorney 5. That's a DC Comics reference that probably not every viewer is going to get. I apologize. But for
the viewers who don't get it, I'm very spooky and I wear a cape and have an eye patch now.
I'm very spooky.
And also, I hate my lawyer dad.
Yeah, it's we'll talk about Apollo's many dads very soon. But the where we are now in Ace Attorney 4, Apollo and Trucy are half siblings, but it's and their mother is a major witness in 2 cases and is surprisingly on the jury for the final case, which seems like a conflict of interest. If both of her children are involved on one side of the case, but
like they don't know that she's her mom.
They do not. They both know who their father is. Trucy's father is Grimarier, this guy from a long line of magicians who's the victim in Case 1, and Apollo's dad is Jove Justice, which is an awesome name, who was revealed in the Ace Attorney 6 to be a traveling musician who died many years ago.
Yeah.
And Apollo is significantly older than Trucy, so it's like oh yeah, it's their mom just had two kids from two different guys several years apart. That's not crazy, but yeah, I think people resented Gyakuten Saibon for Apollo Justice because there was no Maya. Phoenix, you get to control Phoenix in the courtroom, and who's this interloper with weird hair? It's not the kind of spiky hair I want in my anime lawyer.
I think another thing is just that, like, I think Phoenix is just so different in 4, and people are like, no, I know Phoenix to be this kind of person, and
Right.
now like a lot of like Apollo has like the snarky attitude, and then like Phoenix is like just like some weird hobo guy.
But I think Ace Attorney 4 is really good. It's less attached to the first trilogy than maybe any other game because there's no Maya, very very little spiritual possession, and you don't even get the Pearl cameo that Ace Attorney 5 has. But Kristoff is a really good villain. Clavier is a really good opposing prosecutor who may or may not have a love connection with Apollo, and there's a lot of big drama and sort of cool machinations throughout the game. But they're still sort of figuring out Apollo's mechanics. You don't get the graphical bump that the 3DS games got, being the last of the DS games. Yeah, I think it's good. I don't think it hits the absolute highs of the series, but it's fans got to play that one. It's not. I'm not going to call it bad or disappointing.
It has one of the best soundtracks in the series.
It does have a very good soundtrack.
Different composer, I think, is part of the reason. But
Sasuga Steven, our former head of music at RPG Fan. But let's move on a little bit. Dual Destinies, the first 3DS Phoenix Wright game, if you don't count Layton versus Wright, and it also
the first one to feature a whale as a witness.
Only the DLC, but yes, you defend an orca in the DLC case in Ace Attorney 5, and it is crazy. The whale is not very helpful, much less helpful than the multiple parrots that you've had on the stands.
The whale is not very helpful.
No.
Who could have known?
He's a very friendly, very happy-faced animated whale, but it seems unnecessary dragging a tank that size out in a court of law. Yeah, Dual Destinies brings out a new character, Athena Sykes, who we mentioned an hour ago, and she, I think her gameplay is cool because she has some device that is allowed to analyze the witness's state of mind. And the contradictions you find with her are like, when you said this, you should have been surprised or scared, but you were neither. Why is that? So like, and detecting anger, surprise, sadness, happiness during people's testimonies is I think an interesting wrinkle to the cross-examination gameplay. Now, Steven, you said you sort of fell off the series after Dual Destinies. What are things that worked and didn't work for you on that game?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it was just Dual Destiny's fault. At that point, I had played 5 Phoenix Wright games in a row, and
so burnout might have been a factor.
And the games got a lot longer with Dual Destinies. There's a lot more just incidental dialogue. There's a lot more just talking. I think, let me start with what I liked about it. Like I said, I really liked the whole Phoenix as this den mother for all these wayward souls and Apollo. And that Apollo is always put upon. I liked that they tried to do a Phoenix Wright 3 style thing where like they bounced around in time for the final case. The animations are great. You know, even though I in some ways miss the old sprites, I think the new animations are so well done that it's not the worst thing in the world.
I think it lacks the snappiness of characters changing expressions really quickly. Again, you often with a whip crack sound effect or something. But
right.
But the new animated characters do look good and smooth. I don't want to go back to the old way necessarily.
Yeah, the meltdowns look great, you know, and that sort of thing. So it's not like it's all universally bad stuff. What I didn't like was, first of all, Phoenix's new voice actor just completely flubs the objection. Like, it's just like, objection! And I'm like, no. The objection is just this limp noodle of a thing now.
No, it's got to come from your gut, not from, you know, no, come on.
From your cords of steel.
Exactly. I think
Cords
for me,
of tin.
this is, you know, the game became very long. And they've started falling into this thing of every game we're going to add this new mechanic, you know, as a new wrinkle. And it's not that I necessarily don't like those, because they did that in the early ones. You know, they did the Cyclops and all that. but I found myself asking, what does this add to it? And it's just another layer between you and like getting emotional with the story. And for me, I didn't feel like the overarching plot line with the samurai guy. Can't remember his name.
Black
but
Quill.
Black Quill.
Black Quill, the imprisoned samurai who, like, both has a Ronin attitude and a hardcore prison attitude.
Yeah, and to me, it was sort of he combined all the elements of the worst prosecutors in the series. The over the topness of Whipley of Von Karma, the convolutedness. Just
the outward hostility towards everyone in the courtroom of Francisca.
Yeah, I got to the final case, and I felt like some of the plot twists were way too heavily foreshadowed to the point where, like, it's okay if something comes out of nowhere. That's sort of what these games do. But to me, it just felt so protracted and so dragged out. And especially because I played the DLC case where you're supposed to play it, which is apparently after the first case.
Oh, sure.
So it goes on and on and on, and I'm just like, and they keep introducing wrinkles, and I feel like, unlike in 3, where they managed to keep those wrinkles just under control, just barely, in this one it just felt like, and then now the space satellite rotated this way on its way in the other revolution, and the samurai man did this with his magic psychology powers, and, he's so good at convincing, it was too much for me, even though I liked the characters. Like, I thought Athena was a great addition. I liked the dynamic between the heroes, like, working together. And
you were talking about plot twists out of left field. I think that Fulbright being a faceless assassin was one of the least predictable twists in the series.
It was not predictable.
No.
I actually didn't necessarily mind that part because I thought he was a fun character.
Yeah, he was a fun character, and the unexpected nature of him being the villain, I thought was at least surprising, but it's also a little head scratching.
Two last things before I give this up to someone else. I think the Fulbright thing was a little too obvious in the final case. They kind of went from he loves justice to, in the final case, he's like, I'm going to stick to you like glue, and justice, 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 and I'm everywhere all the time. And I'm like, all right, he's obviously the bad guy.
Really?
But, for me, it was just, I got to the end and I just didn't care. I was like, oh, God, the mystery is finally over. This case is too long. And that's sort of my issue with the entire game.
That's how I felt about Ace Attorney Investigations 1. Just because that diplomatic immunity case was hours, and it should have been hour.
Right. So, like, I looked at, you can't view your playtime, but, like, if you can, like, you can view your playtime in Dual Destinies. You can't do it in the earlier ones. And just, like, by the end of Dual Destinies, I was like, this was, like, 50 hours, and it was just too much. Like, it's too much. It's sort of like a filler season of an anime where, like, I like these characters and I like some of the relationship dynamics they build, but I just don't care about what's happening because ultimately it doesn't impact anyone except for Athena personally and kind of Apollo. They tried to do it with Apollo where they were like, my friend was involved and now I'm super angry about everything. So I don't know. I don't mean to sound overly negative because it's not like I was miserable playing it. I just felt like along with 2, and 2 at least had the decency to have a good final case in my opinion and ended in a prompt amount of time. It just felt just interminable. It just kept going on.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't think that the Fulbright thing was obvious. I was just very confused by it, and I thought it was like not a good or believable ending. It was like the same as like the end of the Leighton crossover, where it's like
the
color black, and I'm like, what?
Okay, now Leighton as a series has its own very specific brand of nonsense that because minor spoilers for Leighton games. One of the endings is that everyone in the setting was actually a robot. Another one is everyone in that specific setting had a shared hallucination because of cave gas under the ground. And one other shared hallucination is time travel real? No, yes, no, yes, yes, no. So Leighton is very, very weird about a lot of its ending stuff, and I think that the Leighton versus Wright game had, was like half Phoenix Wright nonsense, half Professor Layton nonsense, and as a result was completely incomprehensible. But, because oh no, there's actually a second town. Oh no, magic is real. Oh no, magic isn't real. And oh no, yeah, we poisoned you into thinking that the color black is invisible. maybe we shouldn't talk about Phoenix Wright versus Professor Layton here. Sticking to Dual Destinies, Keegan, we've gone over the final case and a little bit about Athena herself. Was there anything that jumped out to you about that game?
So the 3DS games, before I start, were the ones that I kind of jumped into recently. Around the time of Apollo Justice, I'd kind of fallen out of the Phoenix Wright games. Not for lack of wanting. I mean, this was like my late teens, so I was just like, oh, look at all this other stuff that I could start playing. You know, nothing really stuck out with me with Dual Destinies. I kind of placed it along the lines of Justice for All also. It kind of felt... I'm basically reiterating what Steven said. It did feel like filler to me.
That's so weird because like I didn't feel like that, but maybe it's because that was the second one I played, or like the first Ace Attorney I played, besides the crossover, because that's not like a real Ace Attorney game. So yeah, I didn't feel any of this like disappointment or like it's like lacking anything. It was a weird one to start off with because you're like you see Apollo and then he's like already like I think either he's immediately like pirate Apollo with like half his eye.
Yeah,
like,
he gets badly injured at the end of case 1. So for the rest of the game, he's investigating something secretly and covered in bandages.
Yeah, and he's like super angsty, and then like,
this was the angry Jason Todd Apollo that Steven referred to earlier.
I felt like I like Apollo a lot, so like I felt really bad for him when like his best friend died and stuff, even though he has family that nobody told him about. But like, yeah, so I felt bad. I think a lot of people don't like Athena because like the new person is usually like, well, I guess Athena's your sidekick, but you also like play as her.
Yeah, but it's sort of like Apollo in the 4th game. Maybe fans thought of her as like an interloper. It's like, man, I want to control Phoenix Wright, not this weird lady in yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I didn't really mind. I like Athena. I think she was one of the better parts of the game. And, like, I like that Apollo has this interesting arc. I think, like you said, Brigid, I think part of it might also be that I had very recently played all of the other ones. So I had sort of a different expectation going in. Mm-hmm. And, you know, new writers took over the games with Dual Destinies. You know, new localization team, I think, handled from 4 onward. So, you know, you just have this very different style that, for me, you know, I was expecting this, like, tightly knit trilogy, kind of like the first ones were, because they had their own things going on, but also, like we said, with 3,
and also,
they kind of
I think we maybe mentioned this before, the original writer of Ace Attorney did not work on 5 or 6. He only did 1 through 4, and then he moved on to the 3DS games.
Right, and so...
To the spin-off games, sorry.
For me, I think, you know, you had Apollo Justice, and Apollo Justice ends on this, like, weird pseudo-cliffhanger. And then Dual Destinies just completely ignores that.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I've heard that, you know, 6 does wrap up some things, but I think 4, 5, and 6 do not work like a trilogy the way the first 3 do. And I think, to me, that sort of lent a little bit to why I felt like it was almost filler, because I was like, okay, we haven't advanced Apollo meaningfully. Like, we've given Apollo new wrinkles, like with his friend and, you know, with him going off on his own. And, you know, you have, like, new wrinkles, like with Phoenix being at the Right Anything Agency and Athena's plotline.
Yeah, I think...
So I think it is just a case of expectations, you know?
Sure. Before we go on to the 6th game, I do want to briefly mention maybe my favorite thing about Dual Destinies, other than the Orca case and other than Bobby Fulbright's ridiculous detective character. I kind of love the death scene in Case 3, the one that takes place at a high school. Because that case has a lot of twists and turns. There's a character who ended up being a woman masquerading as a man. Yeah. One character who was the number 1 ranked student who actually was a terrible student who had paid all of his teachers off. And then the mastermind of the whole thing ended up being this saintly teacher who has a really twisted transformation and death scene before he ends up being found guilty. And that... Oh,
you mean at the lawyer college?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
At the law school one. Did I say high school? Maybe I did, but it's I think it's called it's at some kind of academy, and the teacher is this sort of Aristotle, almost like Grecian, like toga professor kind of character. But when he has his evil turn and his deaths and his his meltdown scene, it's really dramatic and great. But Spirit of Justice, the last Ace Attorney game, the most recent one in the main series, I think is significantly better than Dual Destinies. They really get into Apollo's character in a major way. We learn about his parentage, about his childhood, and it ends up with him doing not really a character turn, but him making a decision that I think caps off the second trilogy, if you can call it a trilogy, because it is much more disjointed than the first three games, as Stephen mentioned. But a lot of the game takes place in a foreign country called Khura'in, where the courtroom process is a sacred ritual, and defense attorneys are treated almost like monsters who are trying to, work against spiritual harmony or something. But the defense lawyers in every single case that take place in Khura'in, which is I think 3 out of the 5, are the entire courtroom is openly hostile to you, which is one fun wrinkle. But the best wrinkle is that spirit mediums in Khura'in. And you meet Maya again there because she's been there for spirit training since the end of Ace Attorney 3. You can see the spirit mediums can see the final moments of a victim's death, and they use that as evidence. So, as for evidence for each one of the Khura'in trials, you basically get video that you can manipulate and analyze of the moments before every victim's death, and that is a weird twist. But being able to analyze the video and manipulate it is awesome.
Is also really scary.
Yeah,
I was so scared playing that, and I also play Ace Attorney before I go to sleep, so it's always really dark outside.
Okay, let me give myself some nightmare fuel before I take a break.
Oh, good.
For
this is
several
all
hours.
sufficiently horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I own that one. I really need to play it. I liked the demo, and it's been a long enough time since I played a Phoenix Wright game that I think I, am in the mood to bring it back.
But back to Apollo Justice's arc, you meet a man who was his surrogate father from his childhood, who is a major character in the Khura'in arc of that game. And you also you don't meet his father because his father died many years ago. Unlike his mother, his father actually is dead. And you sort of figured out what happened to him as part of the final case of the game.
And his brother.
And you meet his brother, who was the biological son of his surrogate father. So there's a. I think this goes deeper into Apollo Justice's character more than the 4th or 5th game does. And I thought it was satisfying. I thought again, I think 3 and 6 are the 2 best games in the series. And I played Spirit of Justice right when it came out. I have it digitally on my 3DS. But it's excellent. I really recommend it to you, Stephen.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody and somebody was like, "Oh, I haven't played an Ace Attorney game in a while. I might play 6." And I was like, they were like, "What's it about?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's about Apollo." And they're like, "Well, I don't like Apollo, so I guess not, because I won't play that one."
Well, that person shouldn't be your friend anymore.
It's very quick to just be to.
How can they deny the love between Apollo and Clavier?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right?
Also, the DLC, which brings Clavier back, is nothing. It's one.
Yeah, it's not great. And also, we were talking about filler cases before. The 2 filler cases, which co-star Athena, that take place back in California, Japan, are real weird. One of them is like a showbiz case where the murderer manipulated everything while being in a car away from the scene and is crazy. And the other one is that weird udon noodles. Rakugo comedy one where an allergy to buckwheat is a major turning point. I think those cases are, diversions and aren't bad, but really it's about those 3 cases in the Khura'in arc where Phoenix learns about, lawyers that are put to death along with their clients, and then you get the reunion with Maya, and then you get a super dramatic final case that is all about Apollo, and all of that is awesome.
I think that one 6 is really good with the first case you're Phoenix, and then you're with second case you're Apollo, and you just go, and then you're sometimes you're Athena, and so it's
you get Athena for part of case 2 and then all of case 4, and then
do they come together Do the two storylines come together?
No, not really. It's really the I'm trying to figure out how to describe this. The Khura'in prosecutor that you deal with for a lot of case 1, 3, and 5 comes as a visiting prosecutor in case 2 out of the blue, just so he can appear in a 4th case, I guess.
Yeah,
He's the one. It's like it's not very cohesive, I think. And I think it might have even been better if they had less Athena and just focused on the Khura'in stuff more. But I think it's like, as an arc, it's very satisfying, and it's again, it's the definitive Apollo Justice game. So Keegan, you've played Spirit of Justice as well. Is there something that you remember particularly good or bad from it that is sticking to you?
Actually, I did want to say Spirit of Justice is the one that I have not played.
Oh.
I did not get the chance to interject that earlier, and I'm sorry.
Oh, my bad.
But,
well, I don't think we've spoiled the ending, so we'll avoid that, Brigid.
No.
But there's a it gets crazy, and but the spirit medium trials where you see like the last moments of each victim, that really struck out to me as cool. And I think the demo, which Steven mentioned before, is basically the first case, which is again worth trying out.
It's part of the first case.
Oh, okay.
It's right up through, I think, the first or second of the like view the death sequences.
Okay. And also, I should mention, Brigid knows this too. There's a very cute dog in this game.
There is a cute dog. He's good.
Yeah, he's a very good boy.
I remember I was playing 6. Like, I played it as soon as it came out, and then then spoilers were like, or like people were talking about it on social media, which is the first time I've ever played an Ace Attorney game that was like that. And like slowly, I kept seeing like statuses and tweets and stuff that were like crying emoji, like Apollo, no. And I was like, what is gonna happen to Apollo in this game? Like, and I was like so scared to like even get to the last case because I was like, does he die? Like, and I was like so sad, like because I thought that he was gonna die, but.
I think this series and the Danganronpa series are the two that I've avoided spoilers at all costs for so long, and it was so worth it.
Yeah, Danganronpa is almost made of plot, so it's like I think I usually don't give a hot damn about spoilers, but for Danganronpa, I think because that game is like its plot and who dies and who survives is so crucial to it.
Yeah.
That's important. We have 4 Danganronpa podcasts on our fine website network of podcasts. 2 about Danganronpa 1 about 2. All 3 of those are on this podcast, and 1 Danganronpa V3 spoiler cast that we recorded for Random Encounter last year. So please listen to those, listeners, if you're into Danganronpa. But back to Ace Attorney. We've run through the whole series. We briefly touched on the Daigakuten Saibon games that are, split between Meiji Japan and Victorian England. We talked about the Ace Attorney Investigations games. Steven, did you play Investigations 2, Gyakuten Kenji 2?
I have it. I've played a little bit of it.
I know that game is supposed to have a cool judge. And because it's a lady judge who either, I don't know if she's the villain or if she's being blackmailed or something, but like having a judge... Basically, it's the game where the judge is briefly your enemy, which is the twist in that one.
Yeah, a lot of my friends that have played it in Japanese actually think it's better than the first one pretty substantially.
I've heard it's good, but I don't know anything. I know very little about it except that the judge is supposed to be a good character in it.
I will say, though, I know that for one case in Investigations 2, you get to play as, I believe it's Gregory Edgeworth, Miles' father.
Oh.
Which...
Oh, that has to be a flashback then, because he died.
There's one flashback case, yes.
Right, okay.
No, it's like he's possessing or something.
Oh, they introduce zombies into Investigations 2, and it's very weird.
Oh, okay. Okay, for a second I thought you weren't joking. My bad.
Oh, no. Total joke.
Yeah, Steven could make something up about Investigations 2, and I'd basically believe it wholesale. But,
oh my god, you were joking. Oh my god.
Stars Mickey Mouse.
No. This is this is in Japan, so it's Ricky Mouse, Dorai Mouse.
Stop it.
What?
Well, okay, no. If I'm trying to make a Disney Doraemon portmanteau word, I think it's probably the end of the episode. we've been going for nearly 90 minutes. But so, listeners, thank you so much for sticking with us for this long, and panelists, thank you so much for recording this with me. I had a lot of fun, and we also have a lot of fun set for the future on Retro Encounter. Next week, we begin our first Mass Effect episode. I am not on those, but I know that Caitlin and Nathan and that crowd is very excited to be talking and playing Mass Effect 1 for you guys. And I think we also have an episode in the work about some boss battles, super boss battles, favorite boss battles, something of that nature that I don't think it's recorded yet, but Peter is going to host that, and he's having a lot of fun planning it. But what I'm really excited to talk about is what we're doing in July for Retro Encounter. We've been planning this for a long time, but you might know that RPG Fan is in its 20th anniversary this year in 2018. Happy birthday.
Woo.
And also, RPG Fan used to have a different name. It used to be a fan site for the Lunar series of RPGs and was in fact called Lunar Net. And so for the month of July, over 4 episodes, we will be playing Lunar 1 and Lunar 2, that is Silver Star Story and Eternal Blue, 2 awesome classic RPGs for the Sega CD that later had ports to the Saturn and PlayStation 1 that became very popular. And I think the first one also had ports to the GBA and PSP. So anyway, 4 episodes all about Lunar. I am fishing out my old PS1 copies of those games and playing through them. It is confusing because I'm also playing Xenoblade 2 at the same time, and switching between Lunar 1 and Xenoblade 2 is completely insane, because like Xenoblade 2 has 12 different kinds of affinity shops, and every character and every side character has their favorite kind of food, and there's 8 systems when you just do your regular attacks. And the most complicated thing in Lunar 1 is some characters have 4 spells and some have 8 spells.
Yeah. That's pretty different.
It's a bit of a difference. But anyway, Lunar 1 and Lunar 2 episodes coming in July. I am trying to finish Lunar 1 before I leave on a plane for E3, so that's what I am doing this week. And I think that about sets the future of Retro Encounter. So before we sign off, starting with you, Keegan, how can listeners find you?
All right, folks. Well, you can find me on the RPG Fan boards as Fozzie Bear over there. And I'm very active on my personal Twitter, and that is @KLeeBrand. Stop on by sometime. Give me a shout-out. There's a very funny story behind my name that I will tell eventually, but I promise you it has nothing to do with Muppets, and it was a horrible coincidence.
Oh, I'm disappointed now. I was ready for a Muppet flashback. Okay. Well, thanks, Keegan.
We'll get to that story eventually.
Okay, Steven, how can listeners find out what you're up to?
Oh, don't. No, just kidding. You can find me. I'm on Twitter. I talk a lot about video game music and localization because that is what I do. SJM Talus.
I can confirm both of those things are true.
You can buy some of the games I've worked on. You could buy Psychedelic of the Black Butterfly, Bad Apple Wars from Axis, Oculus Beat from Xseed, if you really want. You could buy the Persona 5 art book, which I translated. You could do all kinds of cool stuff. But probably Twitter would be the freest way to do it.
All right, and Brigid, your turn. How can listeners reach out to you?
I'm pretty active on Twitter. I am Squidgid, so that's SQUIJID. It's like Brigid, but like Squidgid, like a squid, because I like Splatoon. So.
You are very into Splatoon, and your dedication to that fan base and game is very impressive to me. And also, I thank you for introducing me to the Splatoon 1 soundtrack, which is dope.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's like, yeah, okay, I can talk about that for a long time.
Thank you, Brigid. Thank you, Steven. Thank you, Keegan. If you visit rpgfan.com, listeners, you can find links to their Twitter, Facebook, Discord, Instagram, forums, all kinds of great RPG fan content. There's another podcast called Random Encounter, which is more focused on what people are currently playing and what RPGs are coming out, hosted by Derek Heemsbergen. That is a delightful listen. And if you want to reach me directly, the best way to do so is @TheRealMonsoon on Twitter when I am, acting relatively more normal, and @EvokerForDogs on Twitter when I'm going crazy about Japanese superheroes and like what Persona Q characters have the best individual skills or nonsense like that. Boy, we talked a lot about cartoon anime lawyers. Thank you. Good night. And
Peopleman.
Adios.
Bye.